meditation can't be done with effort. You can't say, abhi ye mujhe karna hai, 100% I have to get this right. The more you do it that way, the more you will struggle. Like you can't say, I have to feel peaceful in the meditation practice. You might not. Right? The day you go to the gym, some days you'll feel energized and some days you'll just drag yourself to the gym. So the same thing with meditation. So entertainment meditation is a phrase that we generally use when we are saying we're haphazardly practicing. Idhar se thoda kiya, udhar se thoda kiya, ye technique acha laga. And we keep juggling between things. That's what we call as entertainment meditation.
Amazing. I didn't realize that this is also possible, right? When you were speaking, I was thinking of Three Idiots dialogue, all is well, all is well.
You will not go from shouting, yelling to being this very calm, peaceful person. This is what people expect, right? People expect, in fact, even my husband, initially when I started practicing, he said, you still get angry, you're practicing mindfulness. Your default system is your emotions, right? You will experience those emotions and those emotions will activate some behaviors in you which have been reinforced for a long period of time. And then I realized, what am I even teaching anyone if I can't follow what I'm teaching, right? It makes no sense. And then I started realizing that it takes me exactly those 5 seconds to yell at him. It takes me exactly 5 seconds to calm myself down and ask him, is there anything you need right now? In this, the ROI you will see, I can assure you, I am a living example. If I can meditate, anyone can meditate. I have struggled to practice. I couldn't sit for 15 minutes. I used to get back spasms, and if I can now lead 4-hour sits, anyone can meditate, right? So, but the key, as I told you, and the ROI happens, and you need to find those small pockets of ROI that happen.
Hello everybody, this is Sudeep here. Welcome back to my channel once again. In today's podcast, I am talking to Preeti Balan. Preeti is an unified mindfulness teacher. In this podcast, I talk to Preeti about what is mindfulness and how it can help us improve our lives and make us succeed in our lives, especially in the world where we live in, which is full of distractions. But before we get started, I just have one request for you as usual. Please do like, share and subscribe to this channel so that I get the motivation to keep bringing on such videos for you. So having said that, let's get started. Enjoy the show. Hello Preeti. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy and glad that we are doing this show together. So, how are you today?
Doing well, Sudeep. I'm happy to be here and to share whatever I can in this space. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm sure my viewers and the people who are going to watch this are going to be enriched after this session. So, thank you once again for doing this. So, as we start the podcast, I would like you to introduce yourself to the audience because that's the general trend of this podcast. Like from your childhood, I know I have done a little bit of research on you through LinkedIn and all that. So you have been working as a technologist, I believe, as an engineer. Then you moved into psychology, then HR, now into mindfulness. So you have done a lot of things in your life. And you are pretty young also. So a lot of things. So maybe you should talk about how did you get into all those things, about your childhood, your educational background, and all those things. Like whatever you want to share.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share. I'll begin with my childhood. I was raised in Bangalore. What I do, one of the roles in my life is being a mindfulness trainer. When I started off, of course, I started with regular schooling like everyone else goes through. And back then, when I was in my 12th, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my go-to was initially psychology, but I got good marks. So then my mother was like, professional course is the way to go. And not knowing too much, I went into doing engineering. I managed engineering. I did well. And then I worked for about 3 years in various automation based companies like Yokogawa and Alstom. And then after that, I moved to Mumbai, got married, and I was looking for places to work. I went to ABC Consultants to kind of figure out, how I can get a job in Mumbai. And someone asked me that, would you be interested in working with ABC? Because they have HR, like recruitment based roles, which require some technical understanding. And I said, okay, why not? It was really close to home. And I said, okay, let's give it a shot. And that's how I started my journey in HR. And after that, when I moved to Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida, I rejoined Alstom, which was my first company. And I rejoined Alstom and I pursued my PGC HR from XLRI because I needed an HR degree to be in HR. So that's what I did with Alstom. And HR seemed like a natural inclination for me. I love interacting with people. I always liked supporting people in the way I could. So that really worked very well for me. In 2009, when my father got diagnosed with cancer, the first time I was shaken up, I kind of thought, okay, you can't control too many things in life. And in 2010, when I had my son in 2011, I was totally shaken up. I realized you can't control anything in life, and that was the time I decided to make a career transition because my job demanded that I travel, and having a very young child, and I kind of felt my child needed my attention. But at the same time, I didn't want to be completely not doing anything because somehow culturally our identities are so associated with what we do. And Amity was really close to my house. I went there, I did a master's, almost, I think that was my 30s. I did my master's in psychology. All the 20-year-olds around me was like, ma'am, that used to be the kind of environment where I went back to college, back to school to do my master's in psychology. Couple of years in Delhi doing my master's, then back to Bangalore. I worked at a child psychiatry center, combining my skills of HR, psychology to support and kind of supporting and managing the clinic. I did that for about 6 years, and it was a natural calling when I was at the clinic. My journey with mindfulness started way before for my personal needs, where I had to manage a young child. I wanted to learn to downregulate myself. But when I was working in the clinic, something really stood out to me, that managing myself before supporting people is very, very important. When you get a crisis call or somebody's calling you being in a panic state, if you don't have your system down regulated, you really can't support anyone. That is when I dove deeper into practicing mindfulness as a skill and applying it in daily life. And I kind of felt it's a preventive modality that can be taken to teenagers, young adults these days, because mental health challenges are so high that if we can actually give this supportive tool to people, it'll be helpful. So that's a long answer to your question. And that's how I actually landed up with, changing careers to mindfulness.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Being a techie, doing engineering, and then moving on to psychology and then mindfulness. That's a wonderful story to say. And I'm sure there was kind of a point in your life where you thought, yes, mindfulness, I need to be more inclined towards, or I need to learn about it, or I need to practice it. So what was that story? You briefly mentioned what you missed out that part. Maybe if you can elaborate that part, was there a personal situation or something to do with your job or something? If you can share that story.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, because the reason I started practicing was I had a very young child. I had given up my job, and as I told you previously, also a lot of our identity somehow seems to be tied to what we do. And that was a very difficult period for me. And probably I had postpartum depression that never got diagnosed because I never went and met a therapist at that point. My knowledge was limited. And I was struggling. And that is when my husband first proposed I attend a meditation session. And this was with a wonderful teacher known as Nitya Shanti. And I attended something called a Joy Shop. It was a day-long workshop that he did. And I came back home feeling just amazing. I was like, wow, this meditation thing really works. And then for years, I did a lot of what we call as entertainment meditation using YouTube. थोड़ा इधर से कर लिया, उधर से कर लिया. And I basically tried coming back to that state of peace that I had experienced in that session. And was helpful, definitely. But over a period, I figured that I need to be a little more systematic in my approach of how I want to bring it into daily life. And that's when I started going through formal training to learn meditation. And it has helped me in tremendous ways. And it's been a blessing in my life. I'd say it's changed the equation with my child, with my relationships in a major way.
Okay, so you briefly touched upon something called joyful meditation or entertainment meditation. And can you describe that it sounds very interesting because I have seen people struggling to meditate, right? It's like how I look at it is that you are sitting there, you are doing nothing, right? You're just closing your eyes, concentrating on something, your breath or something somewhere here or something you are doing. But still people are not able to control themselves, not doing anything. They are not able to control their things. They are not able to control themselves even if they are not doing anything. So it's kind of a strange attitude that we have developed over a period of time and all that. So if you can elaborate on that what is this joyful meditation?
Yeah. So it wasn't joyful meditation. The program was called a Joy Shop. The name of the program was a Joy Shop, and the practices were very simple practices, and which basically makes you realize that meditation can't be done with effort. You can't say, abhi ye mujhe karna hai, 100% I have to get this right. The more you do it that way, the more you will struggle, right? There has to be an element of ease while meditating and practicing. And that's what I learned in that particular workshop. Of course, there were many techniques that he took us through. Even, in fact, something I fondly remember and I still use is a phrase called "how wonderful." He shared this phrase called "how wonderful." Where anything goes wrong in your life, say "how wonderful." I was like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, why would I say how wonderful? No, I mean, it just misaligned. And I tried it and I was surprised with the way that just that little phrase could shift your mindset in that moment. In fact, I try it even now. Like, I've been thrown out of multiple Zoom calls at times, and when you're being a trainer, you're guiding and you're thrown out and you suddenly realize it can really activate you. And in that moment, when I mentally just say how wonderful, it kind of helps downregulate the system and come back. So simple practices like that, we tend to look at meditation or mindfulness as this big thing, right? And we tend to look at it as a thoughtless state is what we need to achieve. And that is like saying, I enter the gym day 1 and I want to have a 6-pack ab. I pick the dumbbell once and I'm like, yeah, ab nahi aaya, kya ho gaya, right? And that is the problem we are having with most of the practices, and most people struggle with that. Yes, a thoughtless state is amazing, but initially when we start, when our mind has been going all over the place for 20, 30, 40, 50 years of our life, we are not going to go into a thoughtless state in the first practice that we're doing. And if somebody does, it can happen, beginner's luck, right? It is possible that it happens, but many times people give up just because of this myth that I need to have a thoughtless state. The second word I used was entertainment meditation. It's basically many times we end up practicing because we want peace, calmness, right? And we are doing a focus practice for peace, calmness, and that becomes kind of, I'm chasing something right now. The problem is your peace and calmness are a byproduct of your practice. They are not the absolute, like you can't say, I have to feel peaceful in the meditation practice. You might not, right? The day you go to the gym, some days you'll feel energized and some days you'll just drag yourself to the gym. So the same thing with meditation. So entertainment meditation is a phrase that we generally use when we're saying we're haphazardly practicing. Idhar se thoda kiya, udhar se thoda kiya, ye technique acha laga. And we keep juggling between things, that's what we call as entertainment meditation. I hope-
Wow, that was wonderful. I mean, amazing. I didn't realize that this is also possible, right? Like when you were speaking, I was thinking of Three Idiots dialogue, all is well, all is well. So,
Bump in
like,
the Yes, and in fact, it's so beautiful that you brought it up. In the system I teach, Unified Mindfulness, we have a practice called as Feel Good, where we cultivate the positive emotions in our body. And one of the phrases that I use to cultivate it is "all is well." And I initially was thinking, when I watched the movie, I said, "Yaar, kaise hoga?" When I say all is well, it's not that all is well. Things are falling apart around me. But just giving a suggestion to your mind in that moment, anchoring your mind, because the mind will spiral downwards in those moments, right? But just training the mind, you stay with this for now. You don't go into those 25,000 negative thoughts. It's a powerful tool. But the whole problem is, if you don't practice it every day, it will not show up for you just during crisis. Right? So that is the biggest challenge that we have in the practice. All of us have in the practice.
right. So you rightly related it with the gym example that one day I cannot just go and expect that I'll get a six pack or something like that. So it will also not show up like this all is well technique or whatever technique you're talking about. It will not show up one day, the day when there is a lot of trouble around me and I expect that all is well will work. It will not, obviously. Right. So something like that. So you talked about also a state of thoughtfulness or thoughtlessness, right? So is it really possible? Because I have been struggling with this, right? When I also try to do a little bit of meditation, I have done a lot of courses from here and there. I have done courses from a Bangalore-based institution online, and then I have done courses from there is another Ranchi-based institution run by Yogananda. His basically disciples and all that. So, but I have never. I mean, they all talk about the same thing, right? Thoughtlessness and all that. But is it really possible to achieve that state? I mean,
To be very honest, there are points in the day where we are thoughtless. There are points in the day where we don't have thoughts. But the mind is so primed to noticing busyness, activity. The mind is never primed to notice rest. A thoughtless state is a relaxing state. Our mind is from childhood, right? If you कुछ करोगे तो prize मिलेगा. When you do something, you get a prize. When you're resting, relaxing, nobody rewards you, right? But the body needs it. So thoughtless states you will have during the day multiple times. So you need to start training your attention to come to and notice when are those times you're having those thoughtless states. In fact, I'll take you through a little exercise where you can notice where your thoughts are exactly happening, right? You can close your eyes if you want or keep it open, whatever works best for you. And even those who are watching can probably try doing it. And just try to bring up your name 3 times mentally. Just repeat your name or your phone number 3 times. Just do it mentally and see where is that coming up for you. Notice the spatial location. Is it in front of your eyes, between your ears, behind your head, on the side? Where is it showing up? You have a location for it?
yes, I do.
Yeah, where is it coming up?
In front of my eyes.
It's showing up in front of your eyes, right? So this is what we call as the mental talk space, right? This is where all the mental chatter happens. So right now you were able to notice it because you took that moment of pause. You took your attention to that place and you anchored your attention there for a few seconds. Now during the day, if you do it multiple times, just come back to that space. Notice, am I having any thoughts? Where is it happening? Stay with it for a few seconds. You will notice there are multiple times in this day you don't have thoughts. Right? So this is one way of priming your mind.
So every time I need to think of that my name or phone number, or am I trying to concentrate on what was that?
The name and phone number was just a sensitization to give you the location where your mental talks happen. But you can just come to, especially when we are thinking very compulsively. Something has gone wrong. You say you booked a cab and the cab guy hasn't come. And you're having multiple thoughts. Oh, I'll be late for the meeting. Ye ho jayega, wo ho jayega. Just pause and notice where is that activity happening for you. Right? So you've noticed the activity of your mental talk space, your thought space. Now, during times you're watching a movie, having a laugh or something like that, again go back and see where's that activity happening to you. Right? There might be times you will have no thoughts. And your thought might come up, yeah, I don't have any thought. And that's a thought. Right? There are points and pockets in the day, and we need to train our attention to come and sit there once in a while so that we are not eternally chasing this thoughtless state time and again. It's wonderful to have it. But again, when you make that the goal of your practice, we struggle. We feel we are failing multiple times. And the traditions which talk about it are absolutely right in the way they talk about it. But to be fair, people like us meditate probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or half an hour at best. In that space, we need to see how we are building our attentional skills. How are we building our concentration? How are we building our ability to come back again and again? Right? So when we make thoughtless state as an objective, then we struggle.
Very interesting. I mean, a lot of information and a lot of knowledge. I mean, processing. So, this meditation. So, you are saying that meditation is somewhere related to mindfulness, right? We all know that from our childhood that कुछ भी हो गया मम्मी पापा बोलते हैं थोड़ा मेडिटेट कर लो देखो तुम पढ़ाई में अच्छा हो जाओगे ऐसा कुछ राइट तो इट हैपेंस राइट यू विल बी एबल टू कंसंट्रेट एंड ऑल दैट एज अ चाइल्ड राइट आई हैव अ किड you probably have a kid, you must have also taught him. So how do parents teach this kind of an habit to a child so that the upbringing and the upbringing of the child as he grows, matures, is better and he's more mindful? Because we live in a very, very dangerous world now, right? Our attention span, I was reading some from other day, not even 5 to 7 seconds. We just swipe left.
Yes.
Right? Or swipe down for the next reel. So it's very important. So how do someone does that?
Yeah. So the simple things with children is they learn by watching. They don't learn by teaching. Right? That was one of the reasons I started practicing, because if I am not able to regulate myself as an adult, I can't tell my child calm down. He's not going to learn to calm down, because as a young child, you co-regulate with your parent, right? You do it together. So the moment you are telling the child, calm down, relax, stop crying, you are basically enforcing something on the child, right? So simple trick is, of course, modeling it for them. With my son, I'm very candid. My shouting is reduced over the years. It's not that I don't shout at him anymore, but there's a way that I used to do it with a lot of frustration, irritation, anger. Now I'm able to keep that in the background and come back to the message I want to convey. And this is what I'm saying is the process of skill development. You will not go from shouting, yelling to being this very calm, peaceful person. This is what people expect, right? People expect, in fact, even my husband, initially when I started practicing, he said, you still get angry, you're practicing mindfulness. Your default system is your emotions, right? You will experience those emotions, and those emotions will activate some behaviors in you which have been reinforced for a long period of time. जो बार बार we have repeated, it's muscle memory, it comes out. To break that, you need awareness first. What is happening? Okay, I'm saying child or relative or somebody is a problem, but how am I contributing to the problem? First step is awareness. The second step is, once I become aware, how can I manage it better? Can I calm myself down there? If I'm unable to, then I'll remove myself from that situation. And if I am still unable to, then I will probably take some time off. Right? And systematically we work towards improving our outward regulation with children, where you're careful about the words you use, you're careful about how you are behaving around them, and careful about things like lying. Right? As parents, we all use white lies. Oh, aaj tabiyat theek nahi hai, I can't come for this party or something like that. These are things we need to be very careful around children. Children don't learn by us telling them nahi jhoot nahi bolna chahiye. They learn by watching us. Right? So these are simple things, and then you slowly work on it. ठीक है, 5 seconds I'm going to hold off my hand. 15 seconds, 20 seconds. You build your strength. Just the way you build reps, right? In the gym, you don't start first day. You don't start with 20-25 kgs of dumbbell. You start with 3 kgs, and that's how we build even our emotional capacity of dealing with things.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good advice, that one. So, I mean, going back to the earlier discussion we were having, I was reading somewhere that there are 2 organs, most probably, one is heart, another is mind, right? Which never stops, right? If I'm living for 80 years, 90 years, 50 years, 25 years, whatever is my lifespan, all my organs, like during sleep or some other time, it gets rest. But the mind and the heart, they never get rest, because the mind is always wandering here and there, especially in the world we live in, and heart is always beating, because if the heart stops, we are dead. So, and essentially all our thoughts, all our actions are related to karma, right?
Yeah.
So what you are essentially saying is that we are doing some karma, but we should be aware of that karma, and we should be trying to do it with calmness and concentration and mindfulness, that what is right, what is wrong, and all those kinds of things, right? So that is essentially your overall message, because without karma, there will be nothing left, right? It's a bit spiritual. I hope I'm making sense to you. But
That's how I was. Yeah, but for the benefit of those who don't really follow the spiritual, see, all these are constructs. According to me, be it spirituality, it's all things given to us by people who have been before us, people who have lived their life, understood life, and some people might totally buy into it, some people don't. For people who don't, we practice it as a skill. Right? You just practice it. Okay, I want to be a better person is everyone's intention. Even if I want to leave out karma out of it, I want to go better than I came into this world. I want to leave this world a better place, right? That's at least what every human being aspires for at some level. Why we do these things is because we want, somewhere I feel when I'm teaching or when I'm sharing this practice, the tradition I have learned from called Unified Mindfulness is a beautiful tradition, which was Shinzen Young's research work of 50 years. And I feel that if that work has to last, I need to reach out to as many people. If somebody 5 generations down the line has to receive it, then it really needs to spread, right? So that comes from the need to leave something better. That's one way of looking at it. Now coming to karma, yes, traditionally, especially in the Eastern traditions, we believe that we have multiple lives. We come back each time, and each time we are coming with these mental impressions that we are building during this lifetime. And these mental impressions are what? Every time how my sensory system receives information and how I am reacting to that information is reinforcing a sanskara. Right? Every time that's happening. Right now, every moment, every second, we are nothing but an input processing output machine. Like this computer you're watching on or a phone you're watching. You receive input, you process it using your mind, you produce output. Constantly. Right? And this output that we are producing, you cannot probably change that output unless you're aware of the input and processing. And that is why mindfulness comes in. Because most of the time, before we even understand the input we have received, we are on the output. And I'll give you an example. My son was not very young, but he was much younger when I started. He's 14 now when I started teaching. And he used to find it very amusing to come into the room and stand next to the camera because, of course, you can't see what he's doing, and he used to make faces. Okay. And this used to really activate me because I'm here trying to speak very seriously, take people through mindfulness sessions, and this kid keeps coming in. And I used to be like, either I can't, I have to keep a straight face on the camera. And I used to get very activated, mute the thing for a few seconds and snap it. And then I realized, what am I even teaching anyone if I can't follow what I'm teaching, right? It makes no sense. And then I started realizing that it takes me exactly the 5 seconds to yell at him. It takes me exactly 5 seconds to calm myself down and ask him, is there anything you need right now? Right? It takes the same amount of time. The problem is with my perception. Because I feel he's here to bother me, so this activation is happening. So I had to skillfully ground myself. Notice when that input would come up of irritation, activation, I had to ground myself, get regulated, pause the camera and ask him, can I speak to you after the session is done? And automatically the behavior stopped. It's just so interesting, right? And children wait, they enjoy these reactions from us, and it's innocent. They don't understand sometimes, it's just fun for them. You react and it just becomes a pattern, a very unhealthy pattern. And this is how I believe that we teach mindfulness to children. And I tell my son that, I regulate myself. That's a simple thing that people can do.
Right. So very important lesson in that story that you told us is grounding yourself, right? What are my options? Then look at the most grounded option and take that path. That will not only keep yourself very, very, mindful and very, very calm, but also the person you are attending to, he or she will also take a lesson out of it. Very, very important story and lesson you shared through that. So thank you for that. So moving on, ma'am. The next question I had is that you are talking about unified mindfulness teaching, right? If someone is struggling, right, with his life is in disarray, something like that. So how should he or she approach in such a situation? Or let's say if he or she comes to you saying that my life is going to the ashtray, so help me. So how does it happen?
Yeah. So first thing, I always do a discovery call with people to understand why exactly they want to practice mindfulness. Is it curiosity, or is it, as you said, your life is in disarray? What is exactly happening? Because this gives me information about their motivation to practice, right? What is motivating them to practice? And then on understanding that, if things are really bad, where somebody is going through intense depression, anxiety, is having some mental health challenges, then I always recommend that mindfulness along with therapy and psychiatry becomes a lot more helpful. It's a complementary and alternative modality as looked at in the Western sciences. So there's no harm in practicing mindfulness, but when your system is that dysregulated, you will not be able to start off with, you're already constantly in that high alert. So then it becomes challenging. So for milder cases, then we start off and people do quite well. Their anxiety levels come down. They're better able to cope with things. But for somebody who's having a very challenging situation, then I do check about other mental health concerns that they may be having and seek support from multiple areas. A lot of times, also people look for quick fix. All of these modalities are not a quick fix. My teacher Shinzen Young always says mindfulness is a deep fix. It's not a quick fix. So nothing will change in a day, in a week, in a month. It takes a very long time. It requires a lot of commitment. So somebody who starts, I usually also give them a few tools, simple tools to regulate their anxiety, to manage themselves time and again, and very short practices so that in that time when you're going through a very challenging situation, people don't have the luxury of 1 hour practice or even the attention to practice for 1 hour, half an hour. So I start off with shorter practices. I tell them, do this for a week. Let me know how it goes. And if things get worse for you in terms of your mental health, etc., then seek appropriate support for that along with mindfulness.
Let's say I come to you and I want to do a mindfulness. I want to take a mindfulness training from you, right? And what would be the first steps? I mean, if you can, you do not have to go into all the details because that will be something very, very, detailed for people who are doing it directly with you. But what would be the steps? What are my prerequisites from my side that I should come with? And what would you advise me step by step, 1, 2, 3, 4, this you should do, if you can tell us?
So the first step would be, there's absolutely no prerequisite to learning mindfulness. As long as you have an intention and inclination, any kind of physical situation you are in, you can always learn mindfulness. I've had people who have been on the bed and also done it. People who have had bad accidents or cancer and stuff and been able to do it from where they were practicing. There's no requirement to sit on the floor or anything like that. You can sit literally anywhere and do it. But the second thing is motivation is very important. Very, very, very important. Why are you practicing? Why do you want to do this? Yeah, some clarity around that needs to be there because that is what is going to keep you going, not me. I can give you the tools, right? And all these tools, to be fair, just give me a second, are already somewhere in some form there on YouTube, right? There's a lot of access for information. The key that people should look for when they are reaching out to trainers like me is experience, right? Why do you want to practice is the second thing. The third thing is, are you willing to go through the grind of just doing it for the sake of doing it? I want my situation to get better. I want to feel more peace, more calm. That might happen, might not happen immediately, right? Those are byproducts, as I told you. But can you just like we did brushing and bathing, right? We brush and bathe. Cavemen didn't brush and bathe. Somebody told us this is a good habit to have and we started doing it. And we do it not because it's fun, it's exciting, we feel rejuvenated. We do it because it needs to be done. You need to be willing to practice it because it needs to be done. It's a hygiene. I would say these three are the key that people need to somewhere understand before they start these practices. Otherwise, you keep digging the well in multiple places and be like, ye bhi nahi chal raha hai, ye bhi nahi chal raha hai, ye bhi nahi. There must be some better, amazing technique out there. There is nothing out there. Everything is within, right? And to be able to reach that, you need to stick with something for a long period.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, जगह we are digging up wells, but पानी कहाँ से भी नहीं निकल रहा है. तो वही situation है सब जगह. And especially the world in which we live in, right? I mean, it's very, very difficult to keep motivation for a long period of time if we don't see the returns. It's an ROI based world, if you can say so, right? Not only business, life is also ROI based. It has become so. Unfortunate world.
Absolutely. And in this, the ROI, you will see, I can assure you, I am a living example. If I can meditate, anyone can meditate. I have struggled to practice. I couldn't sit for 15 minutes. I used to get back spasms. And if I can now lead 4-hour sits, anyone can meditate, right? So, but the key, as I told you, and the ROI happens, and you need to find those small pockets of ROI that happen. Like I told you, the fact that I was able to manage for a few seconds when my son came in, that is my ROI, right? And training the mind to see that is ROI. But problem is, traditionally you're trained, we've been told ROI has to be something so big, right? ये तो 0.0001% ROI है. इसका कोई फायदा नहीं है. That's what we've been, and it is somewhere very unconscious. Unconsciously we learn these things, and so that becomes the challenge. And it is difficult. It is difficult for people to stick, for people to stay. It is me.
Okay. So moving on, a lot of useful information you have shared, and it is very helpful. So um, let me ask you, maybe to narrate a story where you have done some mindfulness session with someone, and they gave me some strange feedback or wonderful feedback, or you maybe thought that how come this is possible? So something amazing happened, or any stories that you can share.
Oh, I can share a lot, but I'll start with there are at least two or three I can think of, but I'll start with one which has stayed with me and has been the most impactful one. And this was of a lady who had cancer, and she used to do the sessions online from her bed, and she's no more with us. And the last interaction I had with her was where she said, "Preeti, my body suffers. I don't suffer anymore." And to me, till now, and every time I tell the story, I get goosebumps. I get goosebumps if that practice can do this for somebody. I mean, if we can give that momentary relief to people, if somebody with cancer can experience that, all of us can experience. Right. So that has been one of the most impactful. I really cherish that, I have literally the pictorial memory of her sharing that to me, and I can't express the joy I felt because it's not to do with me or my teaching. It's none of that. These are not my teachings. They've been given to us by people, and I just share it with others. Right. It was her intention, her effort, her motivation, where she felt that reward of practice. And that's something that I really was, I was really blown away when I heard that.
Yeah, that's very, very profound and very deep if you think spiritually also, right? So we are essentially two things, right? One is the soul, one is the body. So with your teaching, she was able to differentiate between the body and the soul, because the soul never suffers. It never burns. It never gets wet, or it doesn't feel pain or anything like that, right? So it was a very, very profound lesson. Any other stories, similar stories?
There's another one of a teenager, and this was a child who was around 14, 15, had not a very pleasant experience. I don't want to share the details of that experience. But basically, lot of anxiety, lot of fear. She would not even make eye contact when we started. She'd look down, It took 3 sessions, 4 sessions. And one day she smiles and she says, "I can't tell you the kind of relief I feel." And that was particularly mind blowing too, because I thought she's probably not getting any of it when I was sharing it with her, right? Because she's not making eye contact, she's not talking. And the challenge she had was compulsive thinking. Whatever had happened, she kept going back to it and beating herself up, feeling a lot of shame, guilt, and everything else. And it was not a particularly pleasant way for her to keep going back to that and thinking. And just the simple practice of teaching her how to keep something in the background and foreground something else. Right? When we are in the stage, you have background dancers and you have a main dancer. Similarly, in our attention, we have something in the foreground and a lot of things in the background. This skill to foreground and background is what.
Is this something you're talking about, the conscious mind and subconscious mind, something similar, or no, not related?
No. Just for example, as I'm speaking to you, your attention is probably on my voice, right? And maybe you have a fan in the room, you're feeling the breeze of the fan. That's in the background. Your attention is not there, right? Your attention is here. Now, when you're compulsively thinking, overthinking, or something like that, your attention is constantly on your thoughts, right? At the same time, there are many things in the room. There's probably sound. There is, you can see something around you. So training your attention to move from that compulsive thinking to something neutral around you is what I worked with her. And I was really blown away with the relief she felt, because that's what with teens and young adults, we tend to be a little dismissive sometimes and think, oh, maybe they don't get it. They don't want to do it. They're here because their parents. want them to be here. But it was really mind blowing when she told me that, I experienced such relief. So this was, again, for me, a very profound experience, because I realized for this child to experience something in this year, right? Somebody had to go to Japan. Shinzen went to Japan in late 1970s, had to become a Buddhist, learn those practices, create a system called unified mindfulness. So the process of a healing started in 1970, right? And that's how life works. Everything is connected in dots. So it was a very beautiful experience for me again. For me, it was a very spiritual experience, I would say, where in a moment I could see that, everything is connected, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, very rightly put. Everything is connected via dots. You need to be mindful to see that. So that's what is essentially missing in today's world, right? We are so busy with certain things which are irrelevant. And I mean, everybody has to leave this world someday, but I mean, and we won't take anything with us apart from the experiences, most probably, right? Into our next life, if there is at all a next life. So, but we are running behind something which is some things which are not at all relevant. So that's how I look at it personally. So moving on to the next question, Preeti. Uh, for the working executives, right? They are going through a lot of stress nowadays with the economic downturn, job crisis, AI coming in, and all that. Do you get a lot of like requests from people to do your sessions with them, and what is their feedback, and any stories you want to share?
Yeah. So yes, corporates, I do get requests from corporates. I also, in the recent past, have been getting a lot of requests from people in the US, because of the situation there as well, where the stress levels are very high. So if you look at stress, stress is basically experienced by the body when it feels that you don't have the resources to manage a situation. So when you start driving a car, you're initially like this. I'm still like this, but for some people, you are initially like this, and you're only thinking of the clutch brake, and you're literally like, okay, which one is which, right? You're in higher note. You're in a little stressed state, right? As you start driving, as your body starts getting used to doing it repeatedly, your body develops the resources to manage it. So your stress levels come down. So automatically you feel more comfortable playing the music, calling someone, doing other things as you're driving. So the key is to understand that your stress is actually your body not feeling you have resources to manage the situation. That is the first key to understand, right? And this kind of experience, when people have, my recommendation to them is training your body to downregulate. So if water gets too hot, you cool the water down. If you get too stressed, you need to downregulate the body, right? And stress these days happens to us even if doodh wala doesn't come. Okay, life has become that way, right? If the milkman doesn't come, because everything has to go in clockwork for the next thing to happen for most of us. And if it doesn't happen, then the body releases your cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and you experience tightness of muscles, you experience a headache, pain around the neck and shoulder, especially corporate executives. A lot of them have a lot of aches and pains. And usually when I do a session for corporates, it is designed around short practices they can do in their desk. They can do while going to their coffee vending machine. They can do while they go to the washroom. Because, yes, practicing for longer periods is amazing. But in the goal of finding a perfect time to do longer practice, people never practice. Right? And my goal is to say that start with bite-sized practices. Start with 1 minute. Start with 30 seconds. If you can't sit for 2 minutes, do 30 seconds. But start somewhere, right? I also get people who are 60 and 70 who still don't find the time to do practices, because by then they are taking care of grandchildren, having multiple health issues. So we'll never find that perfect time. So this is what I try to teach most working executives. I do get a lot of women who are dealing with home, work pressure, etc. And I recommend very short practices, and I do give them the deeper practice when they are in a session with me. But otherwise, I do give them a lot of practice in daily life.
Yeah, somebody willing to improve their life will always find a way or time to do it, right? So again, it makes me go back to that same 3 Idiot story where Virus was saying to Mr. Lobo कि खाना छोड़ दिया, नहाना छोड़ दिया, सोना छोड़ दिया, काम क्यों नहीं हुआ, right? You remember that scene, right? So something like that. If it is really important for you, you will find ways and means or time to do it. So that's how I look at it. So
Yeah, but you know, I've been on both sides of the thing where it has been really important, and sometimes life situations don't support to find that kind of time. And also sometimes you really want to do it, but your motivation is not high, your health doesn't support. People have a lot of reasons, and unfortunately, with mindfulness, because the results are not like this, or it is not super tangible. जिम जाऊंगा तो 5 किलो वेट कम करना है, आई कैन मॉनिटर, आई कैन डू इट. 1 महीने में हो जाएगा, ठीक है, दिवाली तक आई एम गोइंग टू लुक अमेजिंग, ओके. बट विद माइंडफुलनेस यू डोंट हैव दैट. दैट इज ऑल्सो वन ऑफ द रीजंस दैट पीपल स्ट्रगल, and this is also something I work on with corporate executives, where consistency is a challenge, right? And how can we work with consistency? Because I have struggled. So for me, the key has been, like one of my teacher always said, do a meditation. बेड में जब उठोगे और बेड पे जब सोने जाओगे, you don't find time anywhere. Those 2 times at least you should be able to kind of come into a meditative state. The first thing and the last thing in the day, right? And I don't think time is ever a concern. It is a lot to do with a lot of other things.
that's the important concept you brought in, meditation, which is kind of a yoga nidra or something like that.
Though you can do any kind of meditation practice, just do it on your bed, right? Basically, there are 2 principles. One is meditation, the second is no 0 days. I learned this from Captain Preetham, one of the trainers. And no 0 days, basically you don't have a 0 day for practice. Bhale 1 minute you do or 2 minutes you do, but you don't have a 0. But do a practice every day.
Okay. Good. So, in your journey of this mindfulness, have you met a lot of skeptics? Like, I'm sure you have, right? जो आके बोलेगा कि it doesn't work, right? Like, why are we doing this? We are wasting time. Because you cannot measure the output, or you cannot have a real ROI, or you do not have a device to measure. At least if you go to the gym, you can at least see, हाँ 1 pack आ गया, 2 pack आ गया, 3 pack आ गया, अभी 6 pack आने में और 6 महीना लग जाएगा, right? But here, there is nothing to measure, no device, nothing to measure a mind. It's only you, how you feel. That's the only probably the thing. So
Yeah.
how do you tackle such skeptics? Do you have any interesting stories? How they later all from there? Yeah, and honestly, as a trainer, my role is not to sell something to someone to make them believe that this is working for them. My role as a trainer is to get them to understand their own experience, and that experience could be that it's not working for me, right? It is not to say you're failing or something is wrong with you. That's never the role of the trainer. And this is why I love the tradition I picked, which is unified mindfulness. The entire system or the training process is based on supporting the practitioner to understand his own experience. कुछ नहीं हो रहा है तो ठीक है, कुछ नहीं हो रहा है. Can you be okay with that? Right? Because that is also a form of skill development, where I can train myself to be equanimous with any kind of experience I'm having. Somewhere there is a craving to amazing experiences. And there's an aversion to kuch nahi hona. Right? So, mindfulness is not about craving and aversion. And it is not my job to tell people you have to crave for something. So, my job is to help them understand that both are okay. Both are experiences. Blissful experience is an experience. No experience is an experience. Your mind is attaching a value tag on it. Right? It is, I admire skeptics because it is very important, especially in this day and age with this kind of information, to rely on your own experience. And mindfulness in its entire totality is only about your experience.
It is not about my experience at all. Me as a trainer, my role is to give you the technique, to take you through the technique, and to kind of help discuss back and forth about what your experience was, what were the high points of the experience, what were the challenges in the experience, and how can you work on building equanimity as a skill with your experience. That's my role as a trainer. And that's why in Unified Mindfulness, we do a lot of checking. When we are having any kind of client, we do a lot of back and forth discussion about how the practice was for them. So it's never that I have the answers to anyone's question. Usually people come up with their own answers because we ask them a lot of questions and people are able to connect the dots. Yeah, I experienced that moment where I didn't have a thought, right? So that happens. So in terms of a story about a skeptic, I wouldn't say I've had very hardcore skeptics in the sense where people have been like, ये सब बकवास है type of situation. I have not been in where people have come with that. People are usually coming with a lot of interest and curiosity to understand the tradition, the system. I've had situations where people tend to compare this tradition with other traditions where they say, उसमें ऐसे होता है, this, I don't have this experience there, but it is my role as a trainer to educate them. So that's happened multiple times. I've also had situations where people have not seen any kind of improvement. Nothing is getting better. Everything is the same. And I've seen people saying it's boring. And because beyond a point, your mind seeks entertainment, right? And practice is boring because you're training your attention to come back each time. It is boring. And that's what ends up happening. So in terms of, I really don't have any challenging story. There might be one where someone actually brought up something very challenging in the session where the person used certain words and things which weren't very pleasant. But for me as a trainer, that becomes my point where I have to downregulate myself and respond. That I've had once. And I've also had initially when I started sharing practice, somebody said my voice was giving them a lot of anxiety. And, and this is where your ego contracts. Your ego is like, and it's my responsibility as a trainer to catch that, get myself out of the way and understand what the person's experience is. And that's a work in progress. And I keep telling people I'm a work in progress. I am not absolute attained guru in any way. I'm not even a spiritual teacher. I know the technique. I teach you the technique. I can help you develop the skills. That is where I am as a trainer.
Yeah, all of us are work in progress and it will always be like that, right? So, no, nothing new in that. So, okay. Time has flown actually. So, it's around, almost recorded 1 hour. So, last couple of questions. So, what is the most amazing transformation you have noticed among your students? One story that you would like to always say that, okay, this guy came in with some different mindset and he went out with something else, as a something else maybe. So one story maybe, if you can relate.
Of course, the lady who had cancer, that was like one of the most, I will never forget that one. I have had a lot of young working executives who have come with challenges in speaking up in meetings, challenges in managing breakups, managing, those kind of challenges where they've initially come and they've been been very irregular, not regular at all. But there were points when they came back, they transformed and they left. But I in terms of amazing change, I can't really name anyone particularly, but because as you rightly said, we are all work in progress. One thing that I can share is a particular client of mine who had his family member who was severely ill for many, many years and came with a lot of stress, tension and worry, constant need to be on the edge. And for him, it gave again a lot of relief. That was something that, and the day he lost the family member, he called me right after losing the family member. And for me, that was very touching because it's not easy in that moment to think of, calling your trainer or something like that. And he called and he said, I just wanted to thank you for helping me through this journey. And that was, I think, something very touching for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Those moments are very precious. And sometimes it also brings tears to your eyes also. If you realize that you have really made an impact and you have helped someone. Okay. Is there a mindfulness technique that you practice every day? Simple technique, maybe, if you want to share with our viewers that we should also do it. Maybe for a few minutes a day, which would help them improve in their life. So if you can share that.
I would suggest no matter what we do or we don't, you eat 3 times a day. However busy you are, you drink a beverage, coffee, tea. If nothing, you drink water, right? If any of you want to practice along, you can do it. If you have some water with you or some any other kind of beverage, just take it, hold it in your hand, feel the weight of the glass in your hand. So how is this a mindfulness practice? You're training your attention to come back to what is real in front of you. What is in your present moment. In my present moment, my glass is in my hand. It's not fancy, it's not amazing, but this is my reality, right? So I'm training my attention to come to the sensation I'm feeling in the hand, maybe the coldness, the warmth, whatever is happening for you there. Noticing the weight of the glass, staying with that. And taking a sip, putting the beverage in your mouth, staying with the taste of the beverage in the mouth, the warmth, the coolness, and then following the path of the beverage down your throat, right? And this will really enrich your experience with your beverage every day that you have. Whenever agar aap multiple coffee chai peete ho, to even better. You may not be able to do it all through the drink. It might be way too much to do it, but do it at least for the first 2-3 sips. Just stay with it. So each time you're doing that, you're training your attention to come and sit where you want it to sit, which is the temperature of the beverage, the taste of the beverage. And that is a very simple practice all of us can do anytime, anywhere.
Wow, that's wonderful and so profound. I just realized that even like when we are drinking or eating something, our mind is somewhere else. So it just brought me back into reality. I mean, we are supposed to enjoy our food, the drink, because those are the best parts of our lives, right? Supposed to be. But we are so engrossed in life's problems and everything, we even forget all about this also. So thank you. Trying to set that. Yeah, cool.
In fact, we experience most of our life through our mind. Even a sunset, when we are seeing, we're like, oh, that's so wonderful, that's so wow. Let your eyes see the sunset. Let your body feel the warmth of the sunset, right? But we are experiencing our life through our head all the time. The moment you realize that this is constantly happening, you will come back to what is in front of you very easily. You don't need any major practice. The moment we have that insight, it's easier.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Lot of, how to build mindfulness. I mean, as we come to the end of this podcast, last question of the day for you. It has really been wonderful. Thank you for all those insights. So what is your last bit of advice for all the viewers, all the youngsters who are watching, all the executives who are watching, that this is a very important thing I realize after doing this podcast with you. So how, few advices, 2 or 3 advices that you always would like people to follow so that people can get better results in their life?
Yeah. I would recommend, if mindfulness is of interest to you, do try to either attend some formal programs if you can, where you learn the technique, you learn to practice, and at least commit 10 minutes a day if possible for you. That will be the first thing I'll highly recommend for people to start with. But in case you really feel your life situation is not there where you can attend a program, do anything, use tools that are already available where you can take moments of pause during the day. There are enough YouTube videos, there are enough apps, there are enough things. But there is so much information, you will keep looking for the best information. Don't do that. Start with whatever information you have and start small. It's okay to do it for 1 minute. It's okay to do it for 30 seconds. Even nothing as simple as just focusing on your breath. You have it with you 24/7. Take a breath in. Leave your breath. Just stay with it. Right? That's the simplest practice you can do. You don't need any fancy meditation room, meditation cushion, teacher, trainer, nothing. Your breath is with you all the time. Right? This is another simple practice. You can also bring your attention to the sole of your feet. Through the day, you're stepping on something, you're walking, you're doing something. Bring your attention to the sole of your feet time and again. Whenever you remember, acha, I'm thinking too much, bring your attention there. You'll again get pulled back to thoughts, bring your attention there. So I'd recommend bite-sized practices. Don't wait for a perfect time. There is no perfect time to start practice. Right? And if you fall off practicing, say Vipassana, you go to some amazing retreat center, you come very inspired, 1-2 weeks you are able to practice and you stop practicing for any reason. Get back and start again. When we were children, we didn't know how to walk. We fell multiple times when we started walking. That is exactly what this path is. You will fall, you will fail, but get back on your feet and try again. This is what I'd like to leave people with.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for all those advices and about this mindfulness session. You shared a lot of pearls of wisdom with all of us. At least I personally learned a lot of things from you. So thank you for your time and session. It was an honor and a privilege to host you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Sudeep. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And for anyone listening, just start practice from wherever you are. Don't wait. That's the only thing I'll leave you with. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. So my last request to the viewers, if anybody wants to get into or do this mindfulness session, please contact Preeti ma'am. I will share her contact details in the comment section below or in the comments below. So please feel free to contact. Thank you, ma'am. Once again, it was a real honor and I really enjoyed it. So the time just flew. So thank you once again. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.